Yes, let's talk about hockey, the show that journeys through the history of the sport of ice hockey from its disputed origins to the game we see today. Over the years, the goalie mask has become one of the most recognizable symbols of the game. But this piece of equipment didn't even become widely used until the 1960s, and over the years has evolved greatly from the first experimental prototypes to its current form.
The story of the goalie mask actually starts not with hockey but with baseball, when Fred Thayer, the player-manager of the Harvard Baseball Club, designed a mask for his team's gun-shy catcher to wear in the spring of 1877. This type of mask would eventually make experimental appearances in hockey soon afterwards, as evidenced by this picture of a Harvard roller hockey team from the year 1900. Decades later, Teiji Hanma appeared in net with a more modernized catcher's mask while goaltending for Japan's Olympic team in 1936, while around the same time, Roy Musgrove was playing in the British National League with a modified half-cage. But the catcher-style mask wasn't all that was being experimented with. According to a report in the Montreal Daily Star, in 1927 Elizabeth Graham, the goaltender on the Queen's University women's hockey team, donned a fencing mask for a game after having suffered damage to her teeth in a previous match. In the NHL, reports describe Canadiens goalie George Hainsworth wearing a heavy plaster nose covering for a few games in 1929, though the reports don't confirm if this was an actual attempt at a mask or just the bandaging for his fractured nose. Then, a year later, in 1930, after sustaining a broken nose and cheekbone from a Howie Morenz shot 6 weeks prior, Montreal Maroons goaltender Clint Benedict skated out against the New York Americans on February 22nd wearing a mask made of leather and supported by wire that was described as a mix between a football face guard and a boxer's sparring mask. However, due to the large nose piece obstructing his vision, Benedict would only wear the mask for 1 to 5 games before he discarded it. Benedict's short mask experiment would be the last one the NHL would see for years. But as time went on and the shots goaltenders had to face got harder, broken noses, jaws, cheekbones, and eye injuries became more and more common. With the number of NHL teams reduced to 6 starting in the early 1940s, and no backups waiting on the bench, the goaltenders for these clubs would continue to play even after suffering some of these horrific injuries. Many would retreat to the locker room to get stitched up, then head right back out. With the minor leagues full of young goalies just waiting for a chance to play in the major league, the goaltenders of the NHL dared not to take a night off for fear of losing their job. By the mid-1950s, NHL goalies began experimenting with masks in practice. The one toyed around with the most was created by Delbert Louche, an inventor from Ontario. Marketed as the shatterproof face protector for all sports, this mask was a clear plastic full face shield. However, some goalies complained that the new shield was too warm and obscured their vision by both fogging up and reflecting glare from the arena lights. But while most gave up on this mask, Montreal goaltender Jacques Plante modified it to improve visibility. Plante continued to use this modified mask in practice for several years, but never once wore it in a game. This was mainly due to the negative attitudes that coaches and managers had towards goalie masks at the time. Whether it was criticism of masks hindering the goalie's vision, or attacks on the goalies themselves by saying that they had lost their nerve, there was a lot of resistance towards the idea of masked goaltenders.
However, the first step towards forcing a change in that line of thinking began on November 1st, 1959. That night, Jacques Plante took a rising shot to the face from Rangers star forward Andy Bathgate. After getting stitched up in the locker room, Plante forced his coach Toe Blake into a tight spot by refusing to go back out onto the ice unless he could wear his mask. Left with no other decent choice, Blake agreed and Plante headed back out wearing a new fiberglass mask that was made for him by Fiberglass Canada sales manager Bill Birchmore prior to that year's training camp.
Plante and the Canadiens would win the game 3-1, as well as win their next 17 games after that, with Plante finishing atop the league in goals against average to win his 5th consecutive Vezina Trophy that year, proving that the mask did not hinder his ability to play. Birchmore continued to tinker with mask designs after that and soon came up with a new one that used 540 ends of fiberglass yarn arranged in a manner that allowed for better airflow and made the mask lighter. Later dubbed the pretzel mask, Plante would again be Birchmore's guinea pig when he donned this new design in the 1961-62 season. Once more, Plante would post positive results too, winning another Vezina Trophy and becoming the first goaltender to ever win the Hart Trophy for league MVP. Over the next few years, more people would begin experimenting with mask designs, producing a number of different results, such as the cat-like masks developed by Detroit Red Wings trainer Lefty Wilson, or the improved pretzel design made by former junior hockey player Roy Weatherby. However, both of these mask designs had the flaw of moving around too much on the goaltender's face. Former plumber Ernie Higgins would offer forth a solution to that though. Higgins' new design was bigger and had a rounded chin that better anchored the mask to the goaltender's face. By the beginning of the 70s, Higgins' masks would be the most widely used in the NHL. With more teams than ever in the NHL and the minor leagues, as well as each team now carrying at least 2 goaltenders, a number of new mask makers emerged around this time to keep up with the demand. Among them was Jacques Plante, who had come out of retirement to play for the St. Louis Blues. In 1969, he collaborated with David Britt, a former goalie working in the airline industry, to develop a more solid pretzel mask design. However, after Plante was knocked unconscious by a slap shot during a playoff game in 1970 that was so hard it fractured the mask, he and Britt set to work designing a new mask made of high-impact fiberglass and epoxy resin with ridges that would deflect pucks away instead of absorbing the full impact. While mask developers in North America continued to play with fiberglass designs that fit flush against the wearer's face, they would get a glimpse of a new design from overseas in 1972. During the Summit Series between the Soviet Union and Canada, Soviet goaltender Vladislav Tretiak wore a plastic helmet fitted with a wire cage.
Despite the advantages of this design, it was looked at as an oddity at first. But after career-ending eye injuries to Buffalo goalie Jerry Desjardins in 1977 and Flyers goalie Bernie Parent in 1979 called more attention to the fiberglass design's lack of eye protection, NHL goalies began switching over to the cage design used by Tretiak.
By the mid-80s, the cage became the most common type of mask worn. However, by that time, the next step in the mask's evolution had not only been developed, but was starting to show up more and more. Back in 1977, WHA goalie Dave Dryden teamed up with mask maker Greg Harrison to design a mask with the safety of a wire cage and the snug fit of a fiberglass mask. Dubbed the Combo Mask, Dryden would wear this design in his final few seasons with the Edmonton Oilers. Like the first fiberglass masks though, this one took a few years to catch on. It wasn't until Patrick Waugh led the Canadiens to a Stanley Cup title in 1986 while wearing a more developed combo mask that this design's popularity really started to take off. By the 1990s, the combo mask became the go-to standard for professional goaltenders. And though there have been slight alterations in the design over the years, mainly in the materials used to make the mask, the basics of the combo mask design from 1977 are what we still see used today.